Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, I will start screen sharing now. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, let me start then. Where's my presentation? Okay. Okay, today's topic of my presentation is load testing with Behat. The story of the project is that we have the Mount Vernon. This is a big mansion where George Washington lived. They have a website, and we have rebuilt their checkout. Checkout is very JavaScript intensive, and it has a lot of different steps where users need to go through different kinds of validations, etc. There are multiple scenarios, so we have built Behat test for them. But one of the tricky parts of the project was that their traffic is usually very spiky. So in May, they're planning to have a special event. They have some festivals, like one festival, and they are going, last year, there were 5,000 registers during 2 hours. So they have very big spike of the checkout process, and we needed to make sure that our website, our implementation will actually work. So how we decided to implement the load testing? We were not really we haven't really investigated the possibility of using JUnit or any other testing frameworks because we had Behat tests in place. That was the first thing. And the checkout is very complex in terms of interaction. So we have settled up on idea of using Behat, and how we did that. So we had the staging environment that we were testing, and we have created multiple workers. Everything was hosted on DigitalOcean. I mean, workers and Elasticsearch Kibana server. And then using Logstash, this is a tool that allows to transfer log, to parse them, to store them in Elasticsearch and do queries then. With pretty very well-defined infrastructure. So the part with storing all the logs centrally, doing all the queries, we have used it from Logstash. This is kind of a very technical presentation. We will have a lot of the code, and I hope you will enjoy it. So how Behat logs look like? So this is one of the runs of actual tests that we were running. You can see that this is actual test scenario. This is the name of scenario, and I will talk about using underscores instead of spaces in a minute. Also, we have used tags. So you can see that this scenario has pass1 and pass2. I will talk about them a bit later. But the main idea is that logs that we were parsing on Logstash were looking like this. The parts that we were very interested to gather is the whether test passed or not. So this particular part, and also how much time it took it to run. Each worker, it had Logstash forwarder. And Logstash forwarder is the tool that actually transfer logs from one server to another. So the idea was that every worker has Logstash forwarder, and ELK server had Logstash that was consuming all those logs and placing them in Elasticsearch. Communication between workers and Logstash server was secured with SSL certificate. This is the IP address of our ELK server. All the instructions about how to set up ELK server on DigitalOcean are published on DigitalOcean website. I will have a link in the end of the presentation. What is nice thing is that all this package is actually available as one-click application. So we didn't need to configure nearly anything. We just followed the instructions how to set up certificates. And the idea was that ELK server was generating this certificate, and the only thing that we needed to do is just to copy it over to all our workers. Then you can see the option of files. So we were syncing a log file that was stored on each worker, that was varlog behat.log, to the ELK server. How configuration of the Logstash on ELK server was looking like. So Logstash configuration consists of three parts. So first part is input, second part is filters, and third part is output. So input is where we are getting all our logs. Filters is modifications around the logs. We can do multiple things, parse them, modify, like drop them. We can do multiple things there. And output, where we store them. So input, we were using Lumberjack. This is the part of the Logstash that was accepting all the logs from Logstash forwarder. And this is the part that is ensuring the SSL certificate. A custom thing was the codec. So by default, Logstash accepts each line of the file as a separate log message. But we wanted to have the whole Behat output as the single message. So you can see that we were using multi-line codec, and we were splitting our log messages using the pattern feature. So every line that had started with feature was considered as the beginning of the new log message. So when we have this log message, it's considered as the single message, instead of each line would be considered as separate by default. Second part is the filter. Here we have parsed and extracted a couple of variables from log message. I have splitted the line. It's actually these two lines should be in the same line. So you can see where we're parsing the name of the scenario. This is the first variable. And you can see that the name was consisting of only letters and underscore. This is why we have used underscore instead of spaces, because we could have unlimited number of, well, not unlimited, but fairly big number of spaces in the end of the name. Then the second variable that we were parsing was the result. And the idea was that we were looking for the string one scenario, and then everything that was in brackets was considered as the result variable. So it's one scenario, and then this part would be result. And then the last part, the last bit is the time. And another important thing that I have put is that if any log message fails this rule, this regular expression, it will be dropped. So because by default, Logstash also parses some syslog messages or anything else, and I wanted to ensure that we parse, and we have in Elasticsearch only log messages that we really need. And the last bit is the output. So by default, we were dropping all output to Elasticsearch that was installed on ELK server. And also we had some file with log messages. So during the debugging, I was able to see that actually what messages were stored in Elasticsearch. Let me see if you have any questions so far. Okay, good. Let's continue then. Okay, view present. So this is how Kibana looks like. You can see the log messages at the top with this graph. You can see how many log messages are here and the time period. So the idea is we were emulating big number of users, and we emulated 50 concurrent users and then 100. And by using this metric, we were able to actually see like how many runs of Behat test we had during this time. So we were able to calculate how many minutes we were running. So like 22 minus 12, like around 10 minutes. And we had 450 runs during 10 minutes. So this is our capacity when we do load testing. Also in Kibana, we can expand each log message. And this is how expansion looks like. It's probably hard to read, but the idea is that we have the full message here in the message part, and then we have our parsed variables. So you can see the name of scenario, you can see the time, and you can see result. So it was passed, the name is there, and you can see the time. So after we ran the test, I was just randomly picking multiple log messages. I was able to see what the time, and then I made some conclusions about how long it will take for each run to take. And now let's let me see if you have any questions so far. Okay, nothing. Great. Okay. And now let's talk about how actually to run those tests. So each worker, it had this little shell script. And this shell script actually runs one Behat test. You can see that in the beginning of the test, we have some random number, and it passed in the tags. So before we actually, before testing the special event scenario, we had also general ticketing scenario. And there we were using multiple Behat tests for load testing. So this is the trick to actually randomly pick one of the tests that we want to run. And in this way, we can ensure that we were able to emulate different behaviors of users. So in your scenario, if you have multiple Behat tests, you just need to increase the numbers and use different tags. And as you can see right here, in scenario with only one test, I just simply put like 2 tags for the same test. So every time, it doesn't matter whether we picked first or the second pass, we still run the same test. For the other scenario of general ticketing, it was not the case. Different tests. One test was tagged with pass 1, and another one was tagged with pass 2. But this shell script runs only once, and then it stops. So for our workers, we needed to run this Behat test like indefinitely. So we have used Supervisor to run that. And Supervisor is the system daemon that you can install, and it can track and take care about number of processes to keep running in your system. So in this case, we were using Supervisor. We had only one rule. We needed only one process, and we were running this shell script I showed you on previous screen. So Supervisor was keeping this shell script running all the time. So every time it stopped, Supervisor was restarting it. Another interesting thing is how to actually spawn a lot of workers on DigitalOcean. So DigitalOcean has a very nice APIs, and for that you just need to write a little PHP script even. And for example, in this case, I spawned 50 workers. some interesting parts. So this is the name, and I was naming them differently. This is the region. This is the size of the droplet. The sequence was that I created one worker with all my setup, all Behat tests, all like Selenium setup, everything there, and then I created a snapshot for it. And so with this PHP script, I was just creating multiple droplets from the same snapshot. Some other parts that are important is the sleep command, because we are running a lot of, we are creating a lot of droplets at once. I faced the challenge that sometimes DigitalOcean refused to create them. It just showed a message like unable to create or something. So after adding some delay between these operations, it started working much better. So this is to start, this is to stop them. So I was getting the list of all droplets I had registered on my account, and I was checking the name of the workers, and I had pretty unique name, as you can see. So every time I've seen this name, I was just deleting the droplet. The next part was I needed to get the IP addresses of all these workers, so I would be able to use Ansible to actually send the commands to those workers. So this is a little script that I used to actually generate the IP addresses. So as soon as I had the all workers set up, I ran this script, I get the IP addresses of 100 workers, I copy paste to my Ansible host file, and then I was able to run Ansible commands that would execute shell commands on each of the workers. And these are the Ansible commands I used. So I had a group in my host file that called monverden. So I used I was logging in there with my root account, because I passed there my public SSH key when I was creating all the droplets. So first I updated all the code. Second, I restarted the Selenium there, and I was using Docker Selenium image with all the Firefox, all the tools for creating screenshots, whatever is needed. And another trick was to start supervisor. So by default, when you install supervisor, you will see that it actually auto starts. But I didn't need that. I wanted to start supervisor on all workers manually. So what I did, I just moved the supervisor script from initd folder to actually root folder, and then I was able to ensure that it will not start in the start of the operating system, and I was able to start supervising manually. So when I had all my workers set up, I ran these 3 commands. I started supervisor, so I started all the Behat tests being executed infinitely. When I had all my test results, so I waited like 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then I stopped all of them. And then I've seen all my results in Kibana, analyzed them, built statistics, whatever I needed. And then, of course, I dropped all the workers. Some interesting things to read. I would really recommend you to take a look at the using DigitalOcean one-click ELK application. And of course, you will need to read things about Logstash. This is a very important tool in this setup. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer all your questions. Okay, so the first question is about the infrastructure setup. How many hours were spent to get things done? I think for the infrastructure, I spent like a day. I mean, I created the DigitalOcean droplet with all the setup, and created the system of like starting supervisor. Also, I had from other projects all the scripts to start DigitalOcean droplets, to delete them, to get their IP addresses. So in total, I think like 2 days was the maximum. And we had Behat tests in place. Actually, to write this simple Behat test, it wouldn't take more than, I think, 3-4 hours. So I think it's a matter of like 2 days to actually have all the system running. Tricky parts are actually to get to run the test. So initially, like what actions you need to do. First, you need to like have at least to run the test that you're planning to run locally to ensure that everything works and all tests pass. Then you need to spin up only one droplet to ensure everything works there and connection with Logstash is working. And then you just run all of them. How much cost is bunch of droplets? I did some calculations. So DigitalOcean bills you hourly. So maximum I kept this 100 workers, I think, for like, well, not 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, because you can miss your deadline in this case. So each droplet, I don't remember, 3 cents or something. So multiply by 100, it's like $3 or maybe $5. So anyway, this test would cost you about $10, I think even less. So it's really very, very small money comparing to other tools that you would need to use to run such things. Does anyone have any other questions? If anything is coming from Facebook, from our colleagues from other offices. Okay, then I'm around. You're welcome to ask me any questions. I will post the slides. Thank you very much for listening.